Hi everyone. My name's Kris, and I was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer almost 11 years ago. So I was 23 at the time and knew very little about the disease, knew very little about the fact that young people could get it, and wasn't checking my boobs, etc., etc. A late diagnosis happened. I was ignoring symptoms, my doctor was ignoring symptoms, and I was just subsequently diagnosed with stage 4, so it spread to my spine by the time it was found. But I'm still here. I've had various treatments over the years. I feel like sometimes I meet oncologists that have been in the job much shorter time than I've had the disease, and I feel more of an expert than they are. I feel, much like Sophie has said, becoming an expert in my own disease has been one of the most crucial things that I've done. So I set up a charity called Copperfield. Hands up if you've heard of us. Yay! Great, cool. We were a breast cancer charity, so we filled a gap that was very, very missing in the UK. That was educating young people about their breasts and ensuring that they started a healthy relationship with their boobs and that they would notice if anything changed. So ultimately avoiding what happened to me, a late diagnosis because they weren't checking their boobs or they weren't empowered to speak to the GP if they found something that wasn't right. And now we are a national charity. It's run from London, and we do a lot of awareness work, a lot of education work at schools, or basically we go wherever we're asked to go, and we do lots of national campaigns as well. And ultimately, the idea is to give everyone the best possible chance of surviving the disease, and that is through an early diagnosis. Obviously, doesn't guarantee that the cancer won't come back again at some stage, because it's a bastard and it might do that, but it's at least giving you a fighting chance from the get-go. And we believe everyone deserves that chance. So that's what we do at Copperfield. Copperfield has been more than a charity to me. It has become, I believe, one of the reasons that I'm still here today. I believe that having that focus, and it became my support group, it became my everything at the time when I needed it. So, I started it 2 months after I was diagnosed, so it was from the very beginning. So I didn't have places to go where I could sit in a circle and talk about having this disease with young people, because that wasn't available to me where I lived. I didn't have a penny Brohn down the road. I didn't have any of that. But what I did have was a passion for something that I didn't realize was so healthy until now. Reflecting on it all, and having the privilege to be able to reflect on that all has been one of the best things about it. So I actually stepped away from being the CEO of the charity 3 years ago because, well, for many reasons, but I'm going to give you 2 of the main reasons. One, I believe that charity founders shouldn't run a charity forever. I don't think it's very productive for a charity, but I could talk about that all day. And 2, I wanted to decide when I stepped away from the charity, not the cancer. So I didn't want to get to a place where I was sat in a room thinking, I can't do this anymore because the cancer is not allowing me to do it anymore. I wanted to take control of the situation and say, I'm leaving while I can. And move to Cornwall and be by the sea, which is what I did. So I live in Cornwall, and I'd say the ocean has become one of my most protective friends. And I enjoy it very much, and I do cold water swimming. So if we're going to go really granular on reasons why I think I'm still here, that's another reason. But there's lots of things, but I'd say the key things is having a strong focus on what I believe my life was worth after I was diagnosed, and that was to educate others. And I'm so grateful that I still get to do that today. So that's me in a nutshell.
Thank you, Kris. And over to Laura. I'm already noticing a recurrent theme of the sea here in people's lives, which is something to take away as well, although we can't provide it everywhere, I'm afraid. But thank you so much, Kris, and a big welcome. Laura.
Thanks very much to Penny Brom as well for inviting me here today and just putting on a brilliant conference so far, so thank you. My name's Phillips. I'm 38. I'm a PE teacher, originally from Wales, but I now live in Corsham, which is near Bath. I pretty much lived my life pretty fast-paced. I like extreme sports like skiing, scuba diving, surfing, so bit 100 miles an hour, just putting myself out there. But then probably back in 2016, I realised my life was kind of slowing down and I was getting very frustrated I was just feeling tired, which sounds really pathetic when you tell friends you can't go out for a drink. I'm just feeling tired. So people were just like, why are you tired? And I was going to bed at 6 o'clock at night. So I knew something wasn't quite right, I couldn't train, I couldn't drink, and I couldn't eat food. I'd go out with my partner, order loads of food, and then sit there and go, I just can't eat this. And yeah, as you can imagine, it was quite frustrating for my partner who'd spent quite a lot of money on really great Thai food. So when I went to my doctor and went, look, I'm 34, I'm physically active, I eat well, but I'm tired, they were like, oh, okay, come back next week, we'll check your bloods. And my bloods were just getting higher and higher and higher to the point where my body, I think, was just kind of deteriorating. And I had pneumonia, collapsed lung, fluid on my lung, and then couldn't breathe, and to the point where I just rocked up in an A&E and they were like, yeah, get in now. So my resting heart rate was about 120 beats per minute, and I, obviously, as the great athlete that I was, which I wasn't that great, but I know it should be about kind of 72 beats per minute. I knew something was really drastically wrong. So when I had a CT scan and the doctor came back and went, Laura, it's cancer. You've got tumours on your neck, your lung, your spleen, your aorta, your stomach, and your pelvis. You kind of go, that's a lot to take in right now. And when they go, on top of all of that, they say, yeah, you're going to lose your hair. You won't be able to have children, and you need chemo in 5 days. You kind of sit there and go, yeah, still a lot of information to take in right now. So probably when I was lying on that bed, 24 hours before chemo, I thought, right, what else can I do? Like, what else can I do? Okay, you're tackling the cancer. You're treating my cancer. Great, thank you very much. I'm really grateful for that. But what else can I do? Because I know, being a PE specialist, that health is a complete state of physical, mental, and social well-being. So physically, right, what can I do? Can I exercise? And they just said, Laura, just bed rest. And I just went, no chance on my bed resting, because I knew my muscles were going to deteriorate. I knew mentally I was probably going to get depressed. There was no way I was going to lie in that bed any longer than I already had. And then mentally I was like, right, I need some kind of emotional support. What's the emotional support? And I was given, the only leaflet I was given in hospital was a leaflet for a charity called Why. It was called We Hear You. And I accessed that straight away. But actually in Bath, that was the only thing I had access to, was one resource, and that was my cancer counselling that I did straight away. So when I said, okay, so what support groups are there in Bath? Okay, there's got to be some support groups. Research them. 2. Gynae and breast. I was blood. I was non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. I was like, I don't fit into any of them. Where's other people like me? Like, where's other like-minded people? Like, I need to speak to someone and go, hey, I'm feeling pretty shit today. How did you manage this? Did you go for a walk? Did you do some yoga? Did you have a drink? Did you go to the pub? So I was just so frustrated, actually. And I just felt completely alone. So I sorted out my own walking program. I had my cancer counselling. And then when I finished treatment, actually similar to Kris, I thought, right, that's it. I'm going to start my own cancer community. But actually, I'm going to do it for any cancer, any gender, any age, because I don't want to discriminate. Okay, and I don't want to have any judgment. I don't want to go back to the hospital for a support group. I don't want to sit in a village hall and have a custard cream. I actually... I want to live my life, actually, as long as I can, as healthy as I can, with cancer or without cancer. So that's when I started my own cancer community in Bath, called We Get It. And we meet, and that's why we're quite different, actually, in the sense that our branding is gender neutral. We're very open and honest, and we want to bring conversations that you don't have in hospital or the GPs right here, right now, in your face. So yeah, we talk about cancer and sex. We talk about dying. We talk about living well. We talk about everything that you want to talk to. We bring it to the stage in Bath. So please join us if you're around in Bath, because we're very forward-thinking. We're very open. We're very honest. We meet the reason we're different, actually, is because we meet every week. Every Friday, we meet in Walcott Cafe, which is a really funky place in Bath. We're not shy. We want to be out there with everyone else. Just because we've lost our hair, or we're crying, or we're laughing, or we're missing body parts, we're not hiding away. We want to get out there and live. So, yeah, we meet there every Friday. We sit in a cafe with everyone else, 10:30 to 12:30. Yeah, we talk about random stuff. We talk about the weather. Yeah, we talk about dogs. We talk about anything and everything, actually. But that's what makes us great. We also run a pub night every month with our patron, Bob Crampton. If you live in the Southwest, you might know Bob. He was the ITV weatherman. He's awesome. We love him to bits. And that was actually to engage more men with cancer. He brings his dog round, Bertie, who's also lovely. Then we also have panel events with guest speakers. We've had Steve Bland, we've had Balbabe, Deb James, and then we've also had one with Emma Campbell and Sober Dave talking about the impact on relationships. And we also run workshops. But for me, actually, it was building a cancer community in Bath to meet like-minded people, but actually to say, actually, we want to live. We want to live as long as we can, as healthy as we can. And actually, referring back to Kris's PowerPoint, it's about building a toolbox and finding the right tools for you, because we're all different. But actually, when we share our story at our get-togethers and our workshops and our panel events, we learn from each other. I sit there sometimes on a Friday, so I'm back teaching now Monday to Thursday, and on a Friday I sit there and I listen to other people's stories, and I sit back and I see how much they're connecting and they're helping each other. I'm actually not doing anything. I'm organising it, but I sit back and I let them help each other. So that's the power of what we do in Bath. It's called We Get It. Check it out. I'm very proud of it. It's run by an awesome team, and please come and join the movement. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And again, a big welcome. And I think what you're talking about there, we see here, it's that magic that happens when people are together and start to share and connect and know that they're not on their own. Sophie.
Hello, everybody. I was just going to follow on from Kris's kind of, and also view with in terms of kind of Viktor Frankl. He said, if anyone, what was the quote? Those who have a why to live can deal with almost any how, or bear with almost any how. And I think that's kind of an essence of finding that passion and that purpose that kind of drives you and keeps you going. And that, to me, is beyond medicine. It's kind of finding your own medicine, whatever that is. Hi, I'm Sophie, and I graduated in journalism, and I've been out in Colombia making a documentary. And while I was out there, I started to get some side effects like night sweats and fatigue, and I just put it down to kind of racing around South America, and I was living quite a hedonistic lifestyle at the time. I used to do a talk, I've stopped doing it now, but it's called From Tequila to Spirulina. And it's basically about my days drinking a lot of tequila, living fairly disconnected. I spent a lot of time living in my head and racing around, not realizing that I had a body and it was connected to that. And so came back from Colombia, and I was diagnosed with tuberculosis. So I'm actually at the wrong conference. No, I was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma, so another lymphoma buddy, and ended up having 6 months of chemo for that. And I remember kind of an initial point. So having done journalism, I had a lot of questions. And I wanted to go, I did journalism in Spanish, and I wanted to go into investigative journalism out in South America. And sat down with my doctor at the initial consultation. And I just said, is there anything that I can do to help myself? And this was kind of the trigger for everything. Because he just looked at me and goes, and we're blessed with a lot of amazing oncologists. And I think it really, there is that kind of postcode lottery essence as well of who you come across. But he just goes, and actually he was very at the forefront of cancer research. He just said, cancer's a lottery. There's no reason why you got it. Leave it to us. And he didn't ask me about that lifestyle back then or what I was doing. And fortunately, that was a trigger for my kind of curiosity. And I started to explore a lot of things. However, And that being a trigger as well, a lot of friends, so I was treated on a teenage cancer ward at the time down in Southampton. And a lot of friends listened to that advice, and I just started to see the knock-on effects of them listening to that and having all of these side effects and all these challenges. So the rabbit hole took me beyond chemo. I told my oncologist I was going to a yoga retreat in Costa Rica. I didn't have the funds for that, or the interest really at that point. I ended up backpacking through Mexico down to Costa Rica, and then traveling around to clinics across Europe and looking at the way different places treated cancer, and it was fascinating. Because we have some of the worst survival rates in Europe at the moment, and there are a number of different factors that attribute to that. But when I started to look at it, it was kind of like, the roof is leaking, and everyone's running around putting down buckets, but no one's looking at why the roof is leaking. And your roof could be leaking for different reasons to my roof, even if we've got the same diagnosis. So then when we look into the research in the medical journals, 5 to 10% of cancers are attributed to genetics, and then 90 to 95 attributed to lifestyle and environmental factors. So when we think about beyond medicine, for me, that's kind of looking at the epigenetics. Who knows about epigenetics? So epi means around the cell, and it's all of the things. Again, medicine can be found. When we talk about medicine, what actually is that? And I think medicine can be found in all of the places. It's the people you spend time with, the music you listen to, going out in nature, sea swimming, all of the things that kind of give us life and reason to be. And that impact, the impact of beliefs and the power that we know of placebo and nocebo and the impact on our cells. I'm going to try and say the word, but the psychoneuroimmunology, so the fact that our perception and our beliefs alter our state of being, is totally fundamental. I think, who's also seen Heal? I really think we need to initiate a Heal documentary in the UK, just to put that out there. Anyway, fast forward, started to meet all these amazing people. I only really, to be honest, started my healing when I finished chemo, so probably up until, I now don't think, and I think this is why I've stopped doing the tequila to spirulina talk, because I'm now moving away from my own story and relatability with that and trying to look at a wider picture personally. But my healing really began after chemo. And the whole time I was everyone was saying, you're being really strong, you're being really positive. And that hid the kind of bullshit layer. And Sophie's come across this with me, that I was kind of very disconnected from my emotions. And there is that classic, when we numb the dark, we also numb the light. And I'd definitely been numbing the dark with this false sense of positivity and strength and resilience. Even my best friend, she said, I haven't heard you've only cried once throughout this whole thing, that's brilliant. And I was like, in hindsight, that's about blurb, pretty bad. Anyway, so I met with these people, and I thought, it's kind of that thing that when you're in the jar, you can't see the label. And all of these there's people kind of hidden in places. I think the best healers, often we don't know who's out there. And when these people come together, there's real power. The other thing is the conflict I had. So I had lung toxicity from one of my drugs. And so one of my lungs wasn't functioning afterwards. And I was also severely asthmatic. That's all gone. I can run every day without any inhalers now due to breath work and a few other things. But through that, the doctors, so my homeopath was saying, stop having chemo, it's killing you. And my doctor was saying, stop the homeopathy. And there was all of this crossfire about different things. And even my dad was saying, stop the chemo. And my mum was saying, continue the chemo, because she works for the NHS. So I was kind of caught in this conflict between both sides of that debate. Anyway, in a nutshell, I put on a festival which is a first for cancer awareness and holistic health. Who here has been to Trew? We've got our number one videographer resident in the front row. So thank you all for coming thus far. It's again next July, and it's basically a weekend of talks, workshops, music, and play for all the family. And in essence, the idea, it sounds really weird, people go, so how can you put on a cancer festival? Festivals are supposed to be about fun and celebration, and that's the point. It's kind of like, when we change our association with the word cancer, it also changes again on a cellular level, psychoneuroimmunology. And I think there's great power in bridging the gap between both sides of the health debate, because we have a lot to learn from each other, and there's a reason why there is a debate, and them coming together with no bullshit. I'm sorry, as you are filming. And all of those kind of egos get left at the door, and people are real and they connect and they learn from each other. And I think that's really part of, again, more than medicine for me, is bridging that gap, because everyone has something to offer. But there's a lot of layers that get in the way. So I think we're moving forward, and thank you all for listening. And over to you.
I'm very humbled to be sitting here. I'm always very humbled. I have the pleasure of talking to people occasionally in public spaces, and many people decide to think that I might have something useful to say. I'm always exasperated that not many of them are men, and I notice in the audience there aren't many men. I notice that I'm the third man on stage when there have been lots of women. Men are crap at doing lots of things that the Sophies have been talking about, which is about vulnerability. I'll try not to cry, but I often cry in front of people because I think that what I've experienced since my diagnosis, which I'll talk about in a minute, is the most amazing outpouring of love. And if you express your vulnerability in front of people, you get showered with love. And love is the best medicine. So I'm Nick Parker. I'm 55. And I have an amazing wife and 3 amazing boys. And it was never going to happen to me. And in 2015, in September, woke up and felt like I'd run a marathon through the night. I had chronic leg pain. And I put that down to being 51, being an old fart, going back to squash after a long period, maybe 30 years of inactivity. Over the months, it moved to chronic pain under my rib cage, across my shoulders, mental confusion, nausea, constipation, diarrhea. Went to the doctors. The doctors said, here's a pill for your bone ache, here's a pill for your constipation, here's a pill for whatever. Came back in a month's time, unsurprising, nothing had shifted. They then took some bloods. They said, well, you are an old fart. You're 51, you just got a viral infection which you can't shift. So I had lots of blood tests. I had some liver markers all over the place. Went to a specialist urologist. They said, you're an old fart, you're 51, and you can't shake your viral infection. My wife, being one of you amazingly strong female, part of the female fraternity, said, Nick, stop sticking your head in the sand, we're going to demand more. And we went to the doctor again and we said, we want a scan. So this is September had passed and we're now in November. In November they said, finally, we'll get you a scan. And we were down for a scan. I was down for a scan in January. When I heard that, my wife said, that's not good enough. We managed to get a scan before Christmas. And on Christmas Eve, I got a telephone call. So the worst, and sometimes the best, Christmas present I was ever given was, Nick, you have cancer. And you've got cancer all over your skeleton. It's in too many places to count. And we think it's probably not bone cancer. We think it's probably something else. So we'll do some more tests. So meanwhile, while I was waiting for the more tests, I read up everything I could overnight. So into Christmas Day, 24 hours of reading. Dr. Google. Dr. Google told me that there were a lot of people who could defeat the odds. And so I was vegan by Christmas Day, although I gave myself one day grace of eating my last turkey because I didn't want my children to know until Boxing Day. I told my children on Boxing Day. And I had my blood test results on the day following to say, Nick, you've got advanced, aggressive, metastasized prostate cancer. Your numbers are 150 times normal levels. And so that was all a bit of a shock to the system, obviously. And I then went for some other tests, and you poor gents in the room who might have gone through similar experiences to me, there's lots of quite horrible stuff that goes on up your backside. It felt like sort of tractors were parked up there for long periods of time. When I asked the doctor why, similar to the ladies here, why they thought I got it, they said, or was in the condition I was, they said, you're just unlucky, Nick, you were born with duff genes. I decided that's bollocks, and I'm not going to listen to that because that's removed all my hope, which is a strange thing because I'm a scientist and hope doesn't, or an engineer, hope doesn't really sort of equate. So I had read how a lot of people had defeated the odds, and I was going to at least give it a bloody good try. And so I've traveled a lot of journeys, and I call myself the cancer journeyman because actually I journey in everything. And I've unpicked every part of my life, whether it be my spiritual health. I'm a silver-spooned public school boy, and I don't. Everyone approaches life in different ways, and I've just decided, for example, my spirituality, having researched my Christianity, I feel more predisposed to more Eastern traditional thinking. It's just kind of the way I've ended up. I think we have got lots of lessons to learn from things that have been practiced for millennia over that part of the world. And so nutrition, and I'm starting to ask some of the questions that we're going to be asking some of the speakers, but I love the nuances of words. In my journeys, I revisit words. I have a real problem with the word exercise, because exercise for me has this idea that you have to get to the gym and it's time-bound. Actually, for me, the word isn't exercise, the word is movement. And if you go back to people like the blue zones, of which some people advocate and say is a good indicator of the way we should live our lives, and other people decry it, but nevertheless, they have movement built into their lives. Every second of their day is digging their vegetable patches, lugging water, doing the housework, washing up, whatever it happens to be. So I love those nuances around words. I think they're really, really important. And also within all of this, I started off with my public talk saying the art and science of health. And then I put a line through it and said, actually, it's not the art and science of health, it's the art and science of well-being. And then I put a line through that and said, it's not the art and science of well-being because I'm clearly not well. So it's the art and science of being. And for me, that's what it is. It's about being. And if we can understand what it really means to be in the world, then I think that that is a preventative measure as well as a curative measure, let's hope. So I'm really working on everything that is about what it means for me to be, and picking up some of the Kris's things about what it means for me to be in a community and how I can support a community to be. And that is, I just believe that is, if you be, then all of this holistic stuff is just, it's all congruent. It all just joins up. I mean, just being is not really about stuffing pharmaceuticals in your mouth. That's quite contrary, actually. So why not just do all the nice things to yourself, as well as some of the things that are more conventional? I think conventional buys me time while I do all the other nice things. We are, at the end of the day, however, all mortal, and we forget that. And I think that, so part of my journeying is to understand mortality. And if I can understand death, then I can understand life. And that's an incredibly important part of my journeying. Thank you.
Thank you again to all of you. And I think that idea of being has come through very strongly in each of you, because you've each found your way of being and becoming who you are to its fullest. So let's just open it up now. And I know that there may be questions that you want to ask the delegates here, but also please ask questions of the panel, but also please ask questions of our speakers in the audience. So anyone burning to get started? Jackie. Do you want to say your name?
Sure, I'm Jackie Graves, one of the trustees here at Brohn and a cancer nurse. What I'd like to hear from each of you is if you could go back now and tell your healthcare team, your medical team, nursing team, one thing that they could have done differently that would have really helped you, what would that be?
Okay, who wants to take that one first?
Well, perhaps I might. When you go through chemotherapy, lots of side effects happen, of which, for example, your bone marrow gets nuked. And so if I look at my white cells that are kind of on the floor at that point, and I'm telling my oncologist what to do, and they say, watch and wait, I'm saying, I'm not watching and waiting for my mahogany box, thank you very much. They say, well, if it gets too bad, we'll hit you with this stuff called GCSF, or some four-letter acronym, which you then look up, and it's the most hideous stuff under the sun. I then go to my nutritionist, and I say, what can I do? And they say, where do you want to start? And so I get on this amazing program with my nutritionist of stuffing my face with the most amazing extract of organic mushrooms, which is basically a lot of beta-glucan extracts. And I can switch my white cell regeneration off and on by taking these beta-glucans, which is just awesome. So my advice to doctors is to be more open-minded, even if they haven't learnt it themselves in nutrition. It's shocking how much or lack of nutrition that they have in their tuition. But to say you can do nothing is bunkum.
Thanks, Lee.
I love medicinal mushrooms. It's the season. I think I remember it's that feeling of being treated like an illness and compared to everyone else on the ward. And actually, and with respect, if we really truly believe that everyone's doing the best they can with what they know, then there is a level of... We wouldn't have really gone into researching and becoming empowered patients if that had also been kind of led for us as well. I think in the sense of being told that there's nothing that I could have done, that kind of took the power away. I think to doctors, if you could... And again, there's some amazing doctors right now coming through, and here with Catherine and everything. But if you could imagine the patient as one of your family members or friends on some level, that you see this soul or this individual rather than the illness. And I think what blocks everything is fear. And we can't feel two opposing emotions at the same time, and fear really gets in the way of that kind of gratitude and the healing response. And for a few months, for me, I felt like a bit of an outlier, really, a bit of like I was carving a new way. And even now, doctors would say, oh, so you're the one who does the festival. And my kind of notes would be passed around from doctor to doctor. And no one's really asked, they didn't ask why I was recovering quicker than other friends who had exactly the same treatment, why they had to have, it all varies, but why they had to have more intensive treatment and other things that went on. And I think respecting, when we see someone as our family member or friend, you see that kind of essence of them, and there's more of the whole person approach. And again, time restrictions and everything is a big one. And I think coactive partnership. So when we think about actually this individual, what they do when they go home is more powerful than what we really do when we're actually in the hospital. And so respecting that they can become empowered patients and really having this kind of mutual, and I know you'll go on to this, mutual kind of balance of relationship that they can take charge and they can play an active role is really fundamental.
Yeah, I think actually just the use of language as well for me was just the words and the way that they articulated it. And just trying, I know I went to Catherine and just took all my notes and just went, Catherine, can you help me understand what that means? And just having the time and the patience to kind of just break it down, because it's actually quite a lot to get a diagnosis, then plus all your notes, then your treatment plan. So just having that time to just talk to us about it, just that little bit more. But actually just speaking actually from Sophie, instead of just speaking to the cancer, it's about the whole person. And I know Penny Brohn have that approach here with the physical, the mental, the spiritual and the emotional. It's massive for all of us in life, whether you've got cancer or not, to work on all those areas, but just making sure that everyone's fully understand in hospitals and GP practices on that approach, and just linking to the community, because I'm not sure if anyone else felt like this, but when you leave the hospital and they say see you in 6 months or 3 months, it's trying to connect actually the hospitals to the community, because hospitals provide absolutely brilliant care, but actually it's what's the care in the community, or what's the options and resources in the community, and it's making sure they both understand what's there, because I know there's some fantastic holistic assessment going on in hospitals. That's brilliant, but do they know what is available to kind of guide people in the community? That's the link for me, really. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I would totally agree with everything that they've already said. I think, because I lost all faith in my medical team as soon as I was diagnosed, because for so long I'd been told it wasn't cancer and there was nothing to worry about, and then suddenly I was faced with this unbelievable diagnosis. So for me, it's very much about trying to rebuild some kind of trust and faith that they were doing the right thing going forward. But I've now, 11 years down the line, now have a really good relationship with my team. I've had 3 different oncologists. I think it's really good for people to know that they don't have to stick with one oncologist. They can move on. They can sack and move on. And I didn't know that at the time. And if I wish I'd known how to ask how I want to be told information. So I always assumed that, because no one told me there were any other options, that I had to go to the hospital to receive my results for certain scans. And now I've got to the place where I've had a scan, maybe on a Sunday. I'll email my oncologist and say, can you just let me know if it's all right? And he'll say, yeah, it's fine. So we've got to that stage now, but it's taken 11 years for me to get there, and it shouldn't have taken that long. So for me, to kind of ask how the patient wants to receive information is really important, because not everyone likes to receive information the same way. And much like Sophie is never asking me why I think I'm still here. Because they will have a theory about why they think I'm still here, because obviously their treatments are doing all the miracle work. But even when I come across an oncologist, or anyone basically in the oncology world, and they're so shocked by the fact that I am still here 11 years down the line, because it is quite a big, important fact that not many people survive this long. But no one asks me why I think that is. No one wants to know what else I've been doing outside the walls of the hospital. And I know I'm just one patient, and they can't then replicate it in anyone else necessarily, but that should be of interest. It absolutely should be of interest. And it still shocks me when people don't want to know. Yeah, that would be the main thing.
I'm very honoured to be part of the sorority, I think we are really. I'm a member of a creative writing course at Southmead where I was treated, and I'm the only man. So perhaps the speakers and the panelists could give, what's the message you'd shout out to men to get them to participate, think a bit more, and get involved? My mother is... she's an important part of my healing now because she's a trustee at Brohn. And, well, that's it. Come on, what can we get the men to do?
Well, I am a man, yeah. I say that, though, that actually friends of mine say I'm the most female man that they know. And I have you know, also, I beat my wife to female menopause as well because of the drugs that I'm on. So I hesitate to say that. And then I was going to say, actually, in response to your question, grow a pair of balls, which is another strange thing to be saying to the men who aren't sort of wising up to themselves. But actually, you know, I think it's how we engage men is clearly a very difficult thing because it's horses for courses, isn't it? And men, particularly men who are in business, find it very difficult to be humble and vulnerable and equally about their life. And they just think they can muscle through it, and it's just not a man thing to admit to your frailty. So it's a very, very difficult thing. But actually, you know, I've discovered that if I'm going to be a role model and a leader in every part of my life, if I'm going to be a leader as a father and a leader as a husband and a leader as a work colleague and a leader as a son, then I have responsibilities to all of those people, aforementioned people. And therefore, if I'm going to be this leadership being, I have to wise up to these things. And so it's about, I think it's about pressing the buttons for a man to say, you know, if you want to be around as a leader for your children, for example, and what more importance could there be if you're blessed with children, then you need to do something about it.
Yeah, I just want to connect this to the psychology, whether you've got cancer or not. I think it's a very cultural thing because we're all human beings, not human doings, right? So we're all the same in that sense, but there is more of a cultural stigma for men. And if you look at mental health for men, I mean, it's heartbreaking. I mean, I feel really touched by Nick and go, you know, thank God for Nick and men like Nick. But I think 87 men in their 40s commit suicide every single week in this country. We have the highest, it's now the leading cause of death for men in this country is suicide. So this is a massive mental health issue. And, you know, I would be shouting out, you're a human being. It's okay to feel fear and pain and grief. But that's a huge re-education that needs to happen, not just in the cancer world, but in our entire society. Millennials are doing better. I mean, I ran a course a few weeks ago and we had half the group were men, but they were all 35 and under. But I tell you, they gave me hope for the world. I mean, they were crying and raging and just being human beings because they're getting different messages. So it needs to get into our entire education system. You know, I wish psychology and mental health was just in our schools, but it's not my daughter's school. Nobody teaches them about feelings or what to do with pain or... You know, it's not in our system. So I think it's a very pervasive issue and, you know, it goes way beyond
world of cancer, but actually cancer is often a wake-up call to men to go, oh, I'm a human being, and if I don't engage with my emotional life, I'm dead already at some level. You know, I'm like the walking dead if I'm not feeling. Feeling's what makes you human. So without it, you're not really alive, by the way. You're just not really alive. So huge educational, cultural problem, especially in the British stiff upper lip culture, where, you know, we don't do feelings right. Yeah, you've got a moustache to cover it.
And that couldn't be a more prescient time that you raised that, because it's interesting. So we've had 2 of our clients now saying, we really want to set up something just for men here, because just to make it easier. And I think it's really interesting, because we've tried in the past sometimes to sort of do men-only things, but when it comes from us, it's harder. When it comes from them, I have a feeling that this one might take. So Luke, if you're interested in being part of that, we will sign you up.
I think also we often create very female environments.
Yeah, exactly.
Feel welcoming to men as well. So we need to change the way these things. It's all men need to. It's not that.
Hello, I'm Vicky Willis from Healthcare at Home. We do chemotherapy in people's homes. I'm one of the CNSs. I have a very big cohort of men from 20s up to 90s. And I spend hours and hours and hours sitting with them, talking and listening. Well, they do the talking, I do the listening. But it's actually giving yourself permission as a man. Give yourself permission to cry. Give yourself permission to feel. And exactly what Sophie was saying. You know, it's their culture. It's our culture as stiff upper lips. And it's just breaking down that wall little by little. And I've had patients who have started off being the very, yes, okay, I've got cancer and I'm going to be treated and I'm going to get through this. And then sort of 2-3 months down the line, it's like, hey, I'm now eating this and I'm now exercising and I'm now doing this. And it's because you listened and I talked and we've actually worked it out. And it's actually just, it's that listening. And I think as a health professional, we've got 2 of these and 1 of these, and we should use those 2 more than that. But thank you very much for your input. It's fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you. And you're all younger, so do you see a difference with younger men?
Definitely, and to be honest, I'd say surrounded by, I've got 2 brothers and then a lot of male friends who I think are probably more connected and more in touch with their feelings than a lot of my the girls around, actually, to be honest. And even one of my housemates, he's wonderful, and he's just set up a men's circle. You know him. And I really think, if we think about trauma and the fact that trauma is passed down generationally, we've got, war is still going on, war is still prolific, and we have got a generation of men who have kind of built up this ability to connect to their feelings, and that's passed down from their fathers. So my dad wouldn't, there's no way you'd discuss, actually he's pretty emotional, but there is this kind of disconnect, I think, of trauma from generationally. And then the same as Sophie said, I was going to say it's a cultural issue. It's a bit like when we talk about how can we integrate and be more diverse, and how can we represent different races and different backgrounds and experiences. I also think there is another piece within it of men, but also accessibility. People think that they have to have money to access health. And some of the best things that we can do to be healthy, whether it's sitting with our thoughts and kind of addressing them and trying to create an environment that's more sustainable to health, looking at the way we're breathing, the way we're moving, that's all very accessible. And I think if you don't see people who are like you on a lot of, I haven't seen much marketing material around cancer recently, but a lot of it is female-led. There's an amazing and super powerful breast cancer movement, which is incredible. A friend of mine's co-founder of Movember, and they started it in Australia because it was all about men's suicide. And that essence, I know a lot of guys who have recently become fathers, and they're all going through kind of PTSD with that, because there is this lack of, but on a serious thought, there is this lack of dialogue, and I think it is the need to be male-driven. Also, when you say grow a pair of balls, to me that kind of triggers this thing of what goes back to men not feeling like they can express in the playground and stuff. And you know that thing of Boys Don't Cry. Amazing, it's an amazing film, and yeah, I think that expression of, there is that, it comes all round. Anyway, it's complex, but we're getting there steadily.
Thanks, Sophie. Anyone else want to add to that?
Oh, just really quickly, just for us, really, I just think sometimes it's just keeping it simple, just providing a space, an area, an environment where men can kind of hang out together and talk. I know we're trialling, because we know in our Bath community we're trying to engage more men affected by cancer. So that's why we're starting our pub nights, just to see if that works. Just a space, environment, grab a drink, grab a slice of pizza, come and have a chat. We'll let you know how that goes. But yeah, thank you.
But I have noticed a significant number of men in the sessions that you have that is beginning to change.
Yeah, we do, and we actually have some. We do actually. I'd probably say at the moment we're kind of 50-50 in our kind of weekly get-togethers with the men and women actually. But yeah, which is really great. And actually, we have really great conversations with one of our community members around dating actually. So he's stage 4, and it's really good. He's very open, and it's great to just chat with him about that, and we all support him. But yeah, it's great.
I guess just from my experience of how we educate young people about breast cancer and whether or not we manage to get through to men, because there's still this perception that men don't get breast cancer, and it's still very much there and alive. So I guess our only approach is that we take away any opportunity for men to think it's not for them. So we try to keep everything as gender neutral as possible. When we talk about people affected with breast cancer, we say people instead of women. And we obviously allow men to come to anything that we do, and we allow males to become ambassadors at the universities. And when we do our national awareness campaigns, there's always males, and we had a trans male in there this year as well. So this is very much as a non-gender specific disease. So we just try and make sure that our conversation is happening and it's open, and it's not discriminatory towards men. So that's the best we can do at the moment, we believe.
Thank you. I can't believe we've got, thank you, Nick, 5 minutes. We carry on for the day. So just, it's going to have to be a final question.
Hi.
Over lunch though, so yeah, don't lose the momentum. You are?
My name's Vanessa. I'm kind of predominantly an education consultant within the sort of spa, beauty, sport and wellness sector. And really it's just picking up on what's clearly taken the last 20 minutes. In my role over the last 30 years, I've worked in professional football for 12 years. So I work with a lot of men, educational platforms, doing a variety of different things, and just sharing an idea. Best practice comes from sharing what works in other sectors. I've come across 3 different organisations. Everyone in the room know of some of them or not. If You Care Share, which specialise working with suicide, particularly with young people. They do educational workshops. There's another organisation called Sporting Chance, which was originally set up by Tony Adams around addictions. And they deal with, predominantly, it's all about addressing the mental aspect, how we then approach different things, how we talk about stuff, getting guys together and open up. And there's another organisation that started this year called the Lions Barber Collective. I don't know if anyone's come across them. And they are literally barbers trying to just help other barbers, because people sit in a chair and they chat. So there are 3 organisations that I know about that maybe some best practice and ideas you could chat to, people that are interested in moving forward.
Thank you. They've been training the barbers in counselling. There's something going on. And there's another thing where taxi drivers have also been trained in counselling. A really fascinating movement as well.
Can I just to wrap up finally, can I ask you just for one thing that you wish you could change as we leave? So it doesn't have to be just something that if you could say, stop that or do that, or one point.
Is this change personally or change with society, or what?
Whatever's important to you, either yourself or the people who provide you with support and treatment and all the other things that go with it. Just something that you wish you could influence.
I suppose my wish is that people acknowledge that this is not a cookie cutter approach. I think people, when they are buying a diet book or buying anything, they think that this is my solution. Actually, you have to go on a deeply personal journey of continuous experimentation, and that starts in my mind with you set a hypothesis. So my hypothesis is that I am in a state of dis-ease because of my chronic mismanagement of stress and anxiety. That's the path that I'm on to go and prove and disprove.
Thank you, Nick. Who wants to go next? Kris?
I think for me, in terms of, I mean, there's so much I could say. But I'm going to focus on one thing, and I think it's to be made aware that I can be an active participant in getting better, that I have some control still, even if the cancer seems like the biggest control taker of all, that I feel like I can play a role in getting better. I think the day I was diagnosed, I didn't feel like I had any control whatsoever, and that I mean, I had to dig myself out of that hole, and I'm so glad that I did. But so many people deserve to know that they can have an input.
Thank you, Kris.
Okay, oh, right. Well, I've been a patient or a client here at Penny Brohn actually since I've been diagnosed. So I'm actually going to big them up and have a massive shout out for Penny Brohn, because I wish that they were closer to me. It was an hour to get here, but I would love to have a cancer care centre like this in every city across the UK with the professionals, the access to art, the gardens, the awesome people, the food is great, the meditation room. Like, I just really believe that these centres would be phenomenal really for everyone to access across the UK. So I'm going to say thank you, Penny Brohn. Let's give them a big clap, because I think they deserve a big clap.
Yeah, thank you. I similarly to Kris, it is that kind of coactive partnership and feeling like an empowered patient, and that you have the fundamental role within it. Also, the fact that, following on from Kelly Turner, the research, she sat with a lot of doctors in each of her research around the world, studying the cases of radical remission, and she said to every doctor, have you seen cases of people going into radical remission? And they all said yes. And then she said, have you documented those cases to share with future patients? And they all said no. And I think that narrative, the narrative around the fact that if we had people going and teaching like you're doing here, which is amazing, you've got the culinary school and everything, but people going and teaching integrative healthcare to training doctors and nurses and everything, and opening up, again, bridging that gap. I think mutual respect, compassion, more love in hospitals would be wonderful as well, to drive down the fear. And then finally, to sit in probabilities rather than possibilities for each person, because probabilities then enhance the possibilities. No. Possibilities. I got it the other way around. Possibilities a lot more than probabilities. Less statistics.
Thank you so much, Sophie. Now, we've got some speakers in the audience from this morning. Do any of you want to add to that? Anything from your perspective that you wish you could change or influence, or that you will change or influence? Don't be shy. Sophie.
Is that the health profession as a whole would take emotional dis-ease as seriously as physical disease, and begin to recognize that very often emotional disease underlies physical disease. It doesn't just accompany it, it causes it. I mean, in Chinese medicine get this. It's an entire body of medicine, and they get it. So I learnt from my Chinese health practitioner that grief lives in the lungs. Well, I have lung cancer, and I had like 5 decades of grief that, you know, I'm suddenly introducing myself to. Probably one of the most healing things I've ever done. But in my line of work, it's so profoundly missing in, you know, I'm a Genesis Care patient, and I'm thrilled that Penny Brohn is in there now, but my oncologist, and I have a fabulous oncologist, has never asked me an emotional question in 5 years, not one. And I get they're not trained in that, but they need to be aware of it, and they need to be sending people in that direction at minimum. And I think we could transform healing of the mind and soul at minimum if we paid equal attention to that side of things. So that's my strong opinion.
And I wonder if, I'm suspecting that there's a huge amount of richness in the room in terms of answers to that question. And if people have got either resources or suggestions, we've got a flip chart there. Please do over the break. If there are things, we will pull that together at the end of the conference. And I think rather than feel you've got something that you want to say, do put suggestions of the one thing I would love to change as well. I think that would be a really lovely thing to document from this room. And yeah. Anybody else? Kris, did you have one?
So that alongside all the chemical and medicinal information that they're given and how they're trained to look at bodies, I think there should be an awful lot of training as to how to deal with patients. This bedside manner doesn't seem to exist as far as I'm aware. And I think if medical students were given the opportunity to listen to real patients and to experience some training in the emotions of dealing with things like cancer, not just cancer, but other things too, then I think that would go an awful long way to helping the actual patient deal with the problem themselves.
Thank you. I think that most of us would agree that there is, just thinking about Kris's talk about resilience and the pressure that our young doctors are under, we need to fundamentally train them, change that rather, because if we need to give them space to be able to respond emotionally as well, if they are going to be able to support you in that relationship, we've got to rethink that.
Because a lot of the medical schools, I was at Sheffield Uni in Friends Doing Medicine, it's funded by GlaxoSmithKline, and you've got all of these pharmaceutical companies funding. So you've got this whole layer of hierarchical stuff, to be honest, that again is a challenge.
Hi, just very briefly, I'm quite sure against time. I'm Kirsty Murdoch, I'm a GP, and I teach medical students as well. And actually, just to sort of give you hope on the medical student training front, I have first years and second years coming to my surgery, and the whole focus of the whole of the first term for first years is just to meet patients and talk to them. So we are actively told to stay away from taking medical histories or making lists of drugs or asking questions in a formulaic way. I send pairs of students out to patients' houses and they have an hour just to sit and chat, and that's all they do. There's no more objective than that. And the feedback we get from the students at Bristol University is that those are the most valuable experiences they have in their whole medical training. And they remember the people they met, and I remember the people that I met in my first year in my primary care placement. So that's the first thing. The second thing to say is, certainly at Bristol University, resilience training and wellbeing training is very much embedded. So the water level, Kris, I actually used one of Catherine Zolman's worksheets that I did as a GP teacher, and I did that with my first years last week. So that's very much embedded, and I think that translates when they're talking to patients. And lastly, on the pharma front, I do a pharmacology session with my second years, and we do massively address the pharma push, and there's a fantastic book called Bad Pharma that I promote to them to read. So yeah, there is definitely a movement from when I went through medical school. I started in year 2001. There's definitely been a shift in medical student training.
Thank you so much, Kirsty. And I think it is changing. There's an organisation that was kind of nested in Bristol called NutriTank. It was a couple of Bristol students who said, we don't get enough information about nutrition. And so they've kind of set up to set a cell in every single medical school around the country to campaign for their sort of curriculum to be shifted and changed and addressed so that they have got more around nutrition. And it is the beginnings of things. And Kris and I were involved in a course in Bristol which ran for 15 years called Whole Person Care. So we were kind of, I just want to give you a bit of hope for the future, that I think there is a new generation of doctors coming through who are more, who do actually practice some of these things themselves. They're yoga teachers as well as medical students, or they're studying sort of herbal medicine as well as other things. So cross fingers, they're coming through. But really, yeah, do we?